Silence is not empty, it's full. Full of weight, full of choice, full of everything that doesn't need to be said. Most people talk to be heard, but some stay quiet to stay powerful. They don't rush to fill the space, they let the space work for them. Because in that stillness, people notice. They start leaning in, they start watching, they start feeling the presence of someone who doesn't need noise to exist. This isn't shyness, it's control. It's a man who holds his breath. Not because he's unsure, but because he's done proving. You don't have to announce your worth, just carry it, and they'll feel it. Because silence doesn't hide you, it reveals you. Not with explanation, but with energy. And once you understand that, you speak less, but say more. They observe before they speak. They don't rush in, they don't interrupt, they don't need to prove they're listening by speaking. They watch, they read, they absorb. Not just the words, but the tone, the body, the space between sentences. Because while everyone else is reacting, they're calculating, not to manipulate, but to understand. And when they finally speak, it's not a guess, it's a strike. Because by then, they've already seen who's insecure, who's pretending, who's trying too hard to sound certain they see it all. Because they waited. And that waiting? That's not hesitation. That's advantage. The Stoics did the same. They didn't interrupt the chaos, they observed it. Until the path became clear, and then they moved once. Clean, exact, final. So no, people who speak less aren't slow. They're just not in a rush to waste sharp words on a foggy moment. They think slow, but sharp. They don't jump in. They don't chase the first idea. They don't speak just to keep up. They slow down, not because they're unsure, but because they're cutting deep. Each word is measured, each thought refined, each pause intentional. While others scramble to sound smart, they go quiet to get clear. Their minds don't race, they align. And what comes out of that stillness is cold, precise, undeniable, because they don't speak to impress, they speak to impact. One sentence and the room shifts, not because it was loud, but because it was true. The Stoics called it clarity, thinking without noise, speaking without waste. And those who carry that don't need to say much, because the sharper the blade, the fewer strikes it needs. They're comfortable with silence. They don't rush to fill the gap. They don't fear the pause. They let silence breathe. Most people panic when it gets quiet. They fidget, they ramble, they reach for noise just to feel safe. But the ones who speak less, they sink into the stillness. They own it, because silence doesn't make them smaller. It makes them clearer. It gives them space to observe, to calibrate, to decide what's worth saying and what's not. And in that space, the room shifts. People feel exposed, rushed, unsure, while the quiet one just sits, steady, unbothered, untroubled. That's power, not in dominance, but in presence. The Stoics trained for this, to be still in the storm, to be composed under pressure, to choose restraint over reaction, because in silence, everything reveals itself. You see more, feel more, command more by saying less. Their words land heavy, because they don't speak often. People listen when they do. Every sentence is weighed, every word is chosen. Every pause holds purpose. They don't decorate, they don't dilute. They drop lines like anchors, not loud, but final. Their voice doesn't fill the room, it cuts through it. Because people who speak less don't waste energy on fluff. They say exactly what they mean. Nothing more, nothing less. And that clarity, it hits. The Stoics mastered this. Short phrases, heavy truths, words designed to outlast the noise. And those who live by that code don't need to talk long. They just need to be heard once. Because one clean line, spoken with presence, can echo louder than 1,000 scattered ones. They don't say much, but when they do, you feel it. They listen to understand, not to reply. They're not waiting to speak. They're not loading their next point. They're watching while others perform. Most people hear noise, but these ones, they hear intent. They catch the pause, the nervous shift, the lie wrapped in polite words. Because they're not distracted by ego, they're present. And in that presence, They absorb everything, the tone beneath the sentence, the truth behind the smile, the contradiction you didn't think they'd notice, but they did, because they're listening, like it matters. No interruption, no fake nods, just silent attention that reads you like a map. The Stoics knew the power of stillness and dialogue, not to dominate, but to discern. Because when you listen without needing to reply, you see people for what they are, not what they say. And that kind of clarity is rare and dangerous. So when they stay quiet in a conversation, don't mistake it for passivity. They're not lost, they're just listening, better than anyone else in the room. Their presence speaks first. Before they say a word, people feel them. The way they enter, the way they pause, the way they hold eye contact without rush, without apology. They don't need volume, they don't need spotlight. They carry weight in stillness. Because presence isn't built on charm, it's built on clarity. You can sense when someone knows who they are. Not loud, not aggressive, just grounded, no over-explaining, no overreacting, no seeking permission to exist, just calm, clean, controlled. The Stoics called it composure. Today, we call it presence. It's not about having the right words, it's about having nothing to prove. And that shows in posture, in tone, in restraint. You don't need to announce yourself when the room is already reacting to your stillness. Their presence speaks first, and often it speaks the loudest. They don't waste energy on approval. They're not here to please. They're not built to perform. They don't shape-shift for acceptance. Because once you know your values, you stop needing validation. They don't post for claps. They don't smile to soften their edges. They don't chase applause just to feel real. Their worth? Internal. Untouched by trend, unshaken by opinion, and that makes them different. Quiet, but firm. Respected, even by those who don't agree. The Stoics lived this. They walked alone when the crowd bent. They spoke truth when silence was safer. They held course when approval was a trap. And those who speak less, they walk the same. Because every time you chase approval, you trade a piece of yourself. And they're done making that trade. They speak when it's right, act when it's necessary, stand when it's costly. Not for likes, not for eyes, but because they refuse to betray who they are. They don't ask, will they like this? They ask, is this me? And if it is, that's enough. They speak only when necessary. Not to fill silence, not to be polite, not to make themselves visible. Because when you understand the weight of words, you stop throwing them around. They don't speak to be included. They don't comment to stay relevant. They don't explain what doesn't need explanation. They wait, they measure, and when it's time, they speak with precision. No extra, no decoration, just what's needed, nothing more. And that's what makes people listen. The Stoics called it restraint, not weakness, but strength. Held back until it matters. And when it matters, they don't miss. One sentence, one point, then silence again. Because silence isn't awkward to them, it's strategy. And they'd rather say one thing that lands than 10 things that disappear. So no, they don't speak often, but when they do, it cuts, it lands, it stays. They speak only when necessary. And that's why their words never go to waste. They carry stillness like a weapon. Not for show, not to intimidate, but because it's earned. They don't flinch, they don't rush, they don't fumble for noise when things get tense. They just stay, rooted, steady, cold, in the best way possible. Because stillness is not absence, it's control. Control of the breath, of the eyes, of the moment. While others react, they calibrate. While others panic, they listen. While others crumble, they hold. The Stoics trained for this. To remain unmoved, not detached but decided. Stillness is how they protect their energy. It's how they wait for the right move. It's how they win, without noise. They walk into a room like nothing can touch them, because nothing inside them is shaking. That calm? It's not luck, it's built. And once you have it, you never need to raise your voice again. Because those who carry stillness like a weapon never have to draw it. People feel it and choose silence on their own. The one who speaks less is often remembered more. Not because they tried to impress, not because they told great stories, but because they didn't need to. They chose their words like currency, spent them slowly, made them land. They didn't perform, they didn't chase attention, they just stood, clear, still, whole. And that left an echo. Long after the loud ones faded, people remembered the quiet one. The one who said little, but meant every word. The one who didn't fill the air, but held it. The one who didn't ask to be seen, but couldn't be ignored. Because in a world of noise, clarity becomes unforgettable. So speak when it matters, move with intention, carry the kind of silence that says everything